Yeah, hey Ricardo, hang on. I've got a bunch of people in my office. Just give me 1 second, and I'll be right back to you. Hi, everybody. Fred Kramer here. My pleasure to introduce the next subject of Ad Inc.'s Inside the Design Studio. And I know that many of you think you know Ryce Stallings extremely well. I can tell you that you have no idea.
We're standing in front of this beautiful car. Ryce, can you tell me, where did you get this car?
Married in 1985. We decided, instead of going on a regular honeymoon, that what we would do is we would go to Europe and we would set up an import business for Italian furniture and kitchens. So one of the things that we wanted to do was to go through the process of importing something. So what we decided to do was to buy a car, which we would then use for the year we were in Europe, and then bring it back into this country. So we had gone to Andorra, between France and Spain, up in the mountains, to buy a Fiat Uno, and we saw this car sitting in Pieper's, showroom all the way in the back, and asked him to, get it out, and we went for a drive in the snow up in the mountains, and he scared the crap out of us, and it turned out he was an ex-rally driver, and was scaring the crap out of us so that we would buy the car, which we did.
And so tell me, how long did it take you to decide that you wanted to buy the car?
Immediately. I mean, everybody wants one of these. It's every young kid's fantasy to own a 911. They're iconic.
So I understand you're still working on it?
Yeah, Sarah, it reminds her of our relationship and our honeymoon, so my job is to keep it running, and from time to time it needs work. It was in an accident, and the battery acid rusted out the front of the suspension, so I have the skills. I've cut the whole unibody apart and welded it back together again. I've welded these flares onto the car myself. I do the engine work. I mean, it's a diversion from architecture, but at some point in time, hopefully when I'm retired, I will use this for Walter Mitty racing. And take it on the track as a club racer. When I was 16, I used to go to the racetrack with a racing team as part of the pit crew, and I was an athlete in high school and was really, really quick, and they decided that I would be able to drive the car faster than they could. So they showed up in the driveway with a race car one day and asked my parents if I could go racing, and they would sign the release form, and my parents wouldn't. So ever since then, obviously, I've wanted to be a race car driver, yes.
Okay, so tell me, how did you meet Sarah, your wife?
I met her at a Mark Mack lecture at Tulane University when he was speaking. And it turned out that I was on her jury. And she didn't like me much at first. She ran away and hid, but...
What did you say about her project?
I thought it was okay. So I had to kind of track her down. It took her a while to, get through my stupid sense of humor and, understand what I was saying. But, I've been with her now, 28 years? Yeah.
Good.
3 kids.
3 kids. Okay, so tell me a little bit about your kids.
They're all above average. My daughter Giovanna was, she was a real egghead. She was the top student at Carver Middle School, and, she's now in New York City, which she's always been fascinated with Manhattan. She works at the Standard Hotel in the Meatpacking District under the High Line, and has a boyfriend there who's a graphic artist who was just named to the 20 under 30 by Print Magazine, which is pretty prestigious, and he's really interesting. So I guess I'm lucky that my daughter, came up with somebody that I like.
Okay, so tell me about these paintings.
Well, everyone in the family is artistic. Sarah's mom was a professor of fine art at the University in Havana. Sarah's an architect. Nicole, my youngest, goes to Dash and is a graphic artist. But Giovanna didn't really pursue art, but she did this when she was 8 years old. And, it actually shows that she has some talent in that field. She studied art history, and she wants to be a museum curator or an art dealer. And she's in New York pursuing that right now. So hopefully that works out. So she doesn't come back and live here.
Okay, so tell me about Nikki.
So, Nikki's our most difficult one. She's an achon, which is short for achondroplegic, which means that she is a little person, and she's also one that is somewhat of a medical miracle. When she was first born, she was her brain stem was being interfered with by her foramen magnum, and she stopped breathing, and she ended up getting fixed at Johns Hopkins University by Ben Carson, who's now running for president. And recently, she's started to lose her ability to walk because of spinal stenosis, and she was operated on at Miami Children's Hospital to relieve the pressure on her spine by removing the back of her vertebrae, and they installed 2 stainless steel rods on her on either side of her spine. And she's pretty talented. She's studying graphics. She does fashion photography. She's learning to shoot film with the same camera that I used 30 years ago. And she paints. And, other than the fact that when Ben Carson operated on her, he obviously nicked her brain so she can't stop talking anymore. She's quite a piece of work. Stephen is a 17-year-old professional competition fisherman. He is highly dyslexic, just like myself, and although we've tutored him and done everything we can to get him to read and write correctly, he just hates school. He learns by doing. So this week, he and some of his mates took the 42-foot Miss Brit from its birth by Monty Trainers, and they went down to Key West, where they were entered in the invitation-only World Sailfish Tournament. This is a $40,000 entrant fee tournament with 60 boats. And we just found out on the way home, he texted us that the Miss Brit is now the world champion. Stephen probably won more money this weekend than I make in a year.
Where is the most dangerous place you've ever lived?
Well, I guess it has to be New Orleans. It's the kind of place where you might get killed for your leather jacket. And, my friends and I were sort of intertwined with the musical community there. I owned a little bit of a music club called Tipitina's. And we used to hang out with the musicians, James Booker, Professor Longhair, the Nevilles, the Radiators, people like that. And it gave us access into the black community, places like Tremé, and to go to the clubs that most of the people couldn't get to.
Have you ever lived under a bridge?
I have slept under bridges.
Okay, that's what I was looking for.
At one point after school at Tulane, I decided to go traveling, and we basically sold everything. I sold everything that I owned and just had a backpack, and I went to Europe with a friend, and we ended up in Paris, and the first night I stayed in the North train station, and after that a few nights under a bridge, and we went down into Morocco. It was a different time. Everybody was more adventuresome then. One of the first days that we were in Paris, we were walking down the street, and Pierre Cardin walked up to us and said, would you like to come to the dress rehearsal of the Liquid Memorial Theater? And what this was, it was one of these, hippie-era extravaganza performances where the people who came were part of the show. And it was quite interesting. At first, they blindfolded you, and they played all these games and spun you around and everything, and then they, all of a sudden you were there being hugged by people, and they took your blindfold off, and it was these tall Parisian models that worked for Pierre. It was quite the adventure for I was 18 years old at that point.
Did you travel across the coast of Africa?
Not across the coast of Africa, but I did go. I was really interested in being avant-garde. I was influenced by the New York school when I was in high school. All my teachers came from Manhattan. And, Andy Warhol and all those people were doing their thing at that point. The factory was going on. So we wanted to be like avant-garde. And now I forgot what I was going to say. Let's start again. Oh, Africa. Okay. So anyway, we were also influenced by the Beat Generation, right? Which were, William Burroughs and, Ferlinghetti and Ginsberg and people like that out of San Francisco. And William Burroughs went to Morocco, to Tangiers, and that's where he hung out. So at that point in time, if you wanted to be avant-garde, you had to go to Tangiers and hang out. So I crossed over from Algeciras and hung out in Tangiers and then started walking and hitchhiking down the west coast of Morocco, down to Marrakesh, because they used to sing songs about that place too. And it got to be pretty scary south of there. There were, dead bodies and bed bugs. Rebecca, I find the whole world to be sort of amusing, because the world in general is pretty screwed up. I mean, if you look around, we've been at wars for like ever, and there's so much inequality and so much stupidity going on that it's hard not to, think of things that way. So I guess a lot of people think that I'm just cynical and sarcastic all the time, but I'm really not that way. I really do care what goes on, and I'm, usually all in with whatever I do.
Okay, so tell me about Herzog and de Meuron and what it's like working with them.
Well, first of all, I feel really lucky to have been the project architect for the Jade Signature project. A firm like Herzog and de Meuron, they work all over the world. They have huge design budgets. They basically know a lot more than we know. And they're exposed to a lot more than we are exposed to. So it's been a real opportunity to learn. Their ability to contract and control the project is remarkable. Their ability with Revit is far beyond ours. In the Signature building, there are something like 1,200 columns, which are all controlled by a parametric rig. Every one of the columns is positioned in the building mathematically using a spreadsheet. This is the era of the starry techs in Miami, and the only thing that I see that's a little bit of a negative is that even though they're really wonderful designers, they don't really have any skin in the game. So they're not that concerned about the project budget. They don't really know the local codes and the way that the building has to go together. So they're somewhat dependent on us for that. And I think that the collaboration has been pretty good. That we've been able to take a building that was designed before we got to it and integrate in the MEP systems and all of the life safety and code requirements, and did it in such a way that it enhanced the design.
How do you feel about Starbucks?
Starbucks. I like places that have local culture. And Starbucks coffee, it's everywhere, and it's just uniformly not that good. I think that they tend to create a monoculture, and I think that what we really need is more diversity.
Would you consider yourself avant-garde?
Would I consider myself avant-garde? When I was younger, yes, but I'm at the point now where I realize the only things that I really know is what I don't know. So, this whole concept of being avant-garde and out front, it's a false one.
So we're going to move on to what I call rapid fire.
I've been warned about this, Rebecca. I've been told that you're tricky.
I am a little tricky. Live to work or work to live?
Work to live.
Football or basketball?
Oh, basketball. Yeah.
Mac or PC?
PC.
Blonde or brunette?
Brunette. That was a trick one. I already knew that answer. I've been married for 28 years. I know the right answer.
Mies or corbeau?
Mies. Yeah.
Night owl or early bird?
Early bird.
Yeah, definitely. West Coast or East Coast?
I love the West Coast.
Ooh,
But I'm an East Coast boy, but I love the West Coast.
Chocolate or vanilla?
Chocolate. triple chocolate.
David Letterman or Jimmy Fallon?
Jimmy Fallon.
Yeah, he's funny. This one I think I know. Baked or fried?
You know, fried chicken is delicious with waffles.
Puppies or kittens?
Neither.
Neither.
I don't like pets.
Oh, okay. Wine or beer?
I like beer, you know. By the way, going back to pets, you know, a couple of the people in the office have pet rabbits. And it's so funny because when I see a rabbit, I think of raviolis. Because my Italian grandparents, they used to raise them to make raviolis out of.
Speedos or shorts?
Oh, yeah. You know, recently I've bought some shorts, but I'm kind of a Speedo guy.
Okay.
Yeah. Look at Nikki.
Hotel or camping?
5-star hotel.
Coming from someone who slept under a bridge.
Yes. I know better.
Coffee or tea?
Coffee. Cuban coffee. Lots of it.
Pizza or pasta?
They're both delicious. Pizza.
Pizza.
Pizza Bianchi. Pizza Bianco? Which one? Pizza Bianchi.
Last one, John or Rachel?
You know, I really like both John and Rachel. You know, I'm a little bit quirky, and the fact that I can work at Ad Inc. is because there's people like John there, you know, because he's a little quirky in himself. But you know, I work every day with Rachel, and Rachel's really an amazing project manager. I mean, I've learned a lot from working with her. She has skills. I'm gonna go Rachel. Yeah.
Okay.
I thought I might take advantage of this forum to give some of the younger staff perspective on what they are doing. The work I'm showing is all more than 40 years old. It is my first job after graduating. When I returned to New Orleans from studying in New Mexico, I started to lecture on climatic design. From that, I received a commission to design a duplex for Royal Sutkiss, the ichthyologist that typed the snail darter, a small fish that stopped the Corps of Engineers from completing the Tennessee Tom Bigby channelization project. The house is in Ocean Springs, Mississippi, and was my first design that incorporated what I had learned about climatic design in New Mexico. There was no air conditioning. It was an oriented sun-excluding shape with movable overhang, shown here in the up or heating position. This house had an emissive cool roof and solar water heating. It was super insulated. The house was built to ventilate and store both heat in the winter and the cool nighttime temperatures of the summer. A counterflow air circulating system fed air into a very large mass of desiccant-coated gravel, located in 2 tanks below the first level. The movable overhang was like those boxes at the Beijing Olympics, human-controlled by a rope and pulley system. It is shown here in the summer shading position. The bath had a skylight with rotating insulating panels. When the black tank was heated by the sun, it transferred Freon to the silver tank and the sky lids opened. The reverse happened when it cooled down. It even had Swedish organic toilets. I learned quite a bit from this house, in particular that what worked in a hot, dry desert didn't react the same way in a hot, humid climate. I formed a company, Climate Balanced Homes, and continued to design and build prototype houses. This model shows a typology called an air envelope structure. It had an air-conditioned interior space surrounded by a cool, moist flow of air. As the sun heated the roof, it pulled air through the tubes buried in the ground. This air cooled to the ground temperature, circulated to the roof through a double north wall and an atrium on the south side, and then out a very large roof vent. The inside space was shielded from the real outside temperature by this cool air. The east and west walls were double porous blocks that, when heated by the sun, created a negative vapor pressure and dehumidified the atrium space. This house won a national competition for passive solar cooling. This is the upper atrium, which was eventually filled with plants, which seemed to thrive in the cool, moist air. A folly in the form of a picnic pavilion on the path to the river, where everyone went to take a dip. The client really liked it and commissioned a house based on that design. This is a study model of that house. It was intended to be a dryer with a balance of sun or heat and ventilation, keeping the inner space dry without raising the temperature. The design was solar-oriented, shaded by the surrounding vegetation, and had a cool umbrella roof. I knew that we should start with a light steel structure because a light building reacts quickly to temperature change. The design was modular and was enclosed with one assembly that included a bottom glass vent, a vision window with a solar shading device. The house was sited to use the trees for shade. It had solar orientation with a cool north and hot south side. This picture was taken in 2004 on the 4th of July. The house was 40 years old at this point. On the warm south deck, the north side was a cool screened porch. The kitchen. From this work, I learned that an architect could influence the thermal performance and microclimate of a structure with the orientation and shape of the building. I started to work developing typologies for self-shading buildings. You can see from this model that by leaning the building to the south, you could shade the glass. The north side was intended to be terraces with gardens that absorbed the sun's heat. Then Jimmy Carter lost the election, and Ronald Reagan removed the solar collectors from the roof of the White House, and this type of the design became very unpopular. I think as a group we should learn more about climatic design as a way to distinguish ourselves in the market. Miami has a great climate and vegetation, and people relate to natural spaces. I think we should provide them.